What's up, guys? So in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Zhiyun Weebill 2 gimbal. And I know there have been some complaints and worries about the battery life of this gimbal. I do want to let you know that it is a built-in battery. So if you're considering on getting a gimbal, I just want you to know that this gimbal has that internal battery system. Now, because this has an internal battery system, it's going to be drawing power even when it's turned off. So in this video, let me cover some tips on how you can extend that battery life. So tip number one is to turn off the video transmission charging. This is an option that you can find within the LCD menu. And once you switch it off, you are immediately going to preserve battery life. Even if you don't have the transmission system hooked up to the gimbal, it still will be drawing power. So make sure that is switched off. Number two, make sure that if you do not need your LCD display, you flip it closed, because this LCD display draws a lot of power. It's pretty bright, so it's gonna need a lot of battery power. So make sure you flip it closed, and when you don't need it, you can actually see all the gimbal modes and everything you need right here on the side of the gimbal. Most of the time, you will not need the LCD display unless you're using some of the object tracking features. Tip number three is unplug all unnecessary accessories. For example, if you're not using your follow focus, unplug it, disconnect it. You can leave it on the gimbal if you'd like, but don't forget, the more weight you have on your gimbal, the more power draw it's going to require to power up those motors. So if you're not using a follow focus, remove it from your gimbal. You don't need any unnecessary accessories. This thing needs to have the long battery life that you want, so make sure that you get rid of all of those unnecessary accessories. And this goes obviously to my next point, which is lighten up the payload. If you feel like you're going to be shooting on a prime lens, don't put on a zoom lens just because it has that focal length. All right, go as light as you can. If you want all day battery life with this gimbal, use a lighter camera if your shoot can get away with it. Use a lighter lens if your shoot or scene can get away with it. Don't always think that you have to use the heaviest setup because you want as many features as possible on your lens and camera, because if you want that battery life, I mean, you're gonna have to compromise some things there. This next tip is also very important because I see a lot of people do this on their gimbals, and that is making zoom adjustments or just tilt adjustments, hand positioning. Believe it or not, when you do this when the gimbal is turned on, this draws a lot of power to the motors and away from the battery. You're stressing out the motors by hand positioning the tilt. And I've done this in my videos too, like for example on the Crane 2S and on the Crane 2. I was able to get away with this on those gimbals because those batteries on those gimbals were interchangeable and I had a ton laying around. But on this gimbal, obviously you can hand position it too, but it's going to be drawing a lot more power. Remember, this is all about efficiency in this video. So if you want that long battery life, keep your hands away from the motors. And this goes right into my next tip. Is your day a windy day? Are you shooting on a windy day? Wind takes a lot of power out of the gimbal. If you are not that experienced with a gimbal, go back to glide cams, go back to manual stabilizers. Remember how difficult it was to shoot with those things on windy days? You had to make a lot of adjustments to compensate for wind. Well, guess what? The gimbal has to do the same exact thing. It has to compensate for wind and inertia and all of that stuff. So if you're shooting on a windy day, if you're shooting out of a moving car, you're gonna generate a lot of wind, and that's gonna add some more power draw to the motors and away from the battery. That's gonna lessen your battery life. So if you can, if you want the most battery life out of this gimbal, stay away from the wind. And here's a fun little fact which may or may not be important to you, but lock mode draws the least amount of power. So if you really want every single second out of this battery, shoot in lock mode, because that will draw the least amount of power. Okay, and the last tip, which is probably the most important tip from this whole entire video, and that is make sure that your gimbal is properly balanced. I have made so many tutorials on this on YouTube. You can check out this one right here, which I think is my most recent balancing tutorial on gimbals. If your gimbal is not properly balanced, you are going to be stressing out your motors more. It's going to be drawing more power out of your batteries. And believe it or not, this is the best tip that I can offer you in this video, because with the properly balanced gimbal, you are going to get the best battery life. Even if you have a heavy payload, if it's properly balanced, your motors will work less, drawing less power from the battery. All right, and here's a bonus tip, which is going to be very important for those of you. If you want limitless power, use a power bank. All right, at the bottom of this gimbal, there is a USB-C port. Just hook it up to an external power bank and you will have as much power as you want. You can leave this gimbal running while it's charging, so you can actually have a little power bank in your pocket and just have a wire going, you know, I don't know, under your shirt, over your shirt, and connected into the gimbal, and you're gonna have limitless power. Also, if you hook this thing up to a bigger rig, like a car rig, for example, you can easily hook up a V-mount battery to this gimbal via USB-C and have it power that gimbal that way. So there's a lot of different power options, and you can extend this battery life for as long as you want. So a power bank is a pretty simple solution, and I'll link some down below that I rely on and some that last a very long time. So make sure you check those out. And if you're wondering whether or not you should get the Weebill 2 gimbal from Zhiyun, check out some of my review videos, I don't know, right up here, wherever they pop up in the cards, and that will give you a demo of how good this gimbal can perform. Okay, one more thing. I did mention this slightly earlier in the video, and that is because of the built-in battery on the Weebill 2 gimbal, it's gonna be continuously drawing power even when it's powered off. A lot of equipment has that issue, even iPhones have this issue when they're powered off. So before your shoot, make sure that your gimbal remains on charge until you leave the house, or you can even charge it while you're in the car using a power bank, but make sure it's continuously charging until your shoot if you want the most battery life out of this gimbal, okay? Don't forget, even when powered off, this thing is going to be draining a little bit of battery. Not a ton, but enough that it will drain it completely within about 1 to 2 weeks of non-use, okay? Keep that in mind, guys. All right, and again, thanks for watching, and all the links down below to all the equipment that I use. All right, peace.